Hey, Luminary, if you've been having a hard time taking the foot off the gas without guilting yourself into working harder or doing more, then this is the StarCast that is for you because July is asking you to prioritize your self-care. And yes, you are going to do it. Let me tell you why. Welcome to Star Powered Astrology for Changemakers. I'm Leslie Tagorda, your guide, a Hawaii-born Filipino Jewish astrologer who loves navigating visionaries like you through the spiritual journey of your work so that you can be inspired to lead by your chart and become the luminary leader you were born to be. Welcome back, Luminary, to another episode. I myself am kind of following the cosmos's energy and winding down just a little bit. This first half of the year has just been like so accelerated, so fast. And as we get into that kind of last trimester of the year, when we have a couple of like Mars retrograde and just a couple of other things going on in the sky, things are going to also get like really, really fast. But right now, it's the time to kind of slow down, and not slow down because you're like, oh, I got to do this, I got to make money, I got to do this. If you're pushing against that really need to kind of reclaim some self-joy, to go inwards, this is really going to be that month that kind of kicks your butt if you don't slow down. So today I want to go over why I called the theme for July reclaiming your self joy, and why it's so important to not only slow down but also to get clear on what you want and what you need to nourish yourself. I have a guess. I'm going to guess that 90% of us here don't truly know what we need in order to feel safe and secure and stable and certain. Let me tell you, it's not money, it's not power, it's not control. It's it's something deeper inside. And I bet you that you might be on the fence, not really exactly allowing yourself to know what truly lights you up, feeling guilty or feeling like what lights you up isn't valuable enough to be in this world. Well, I've been noticing a ton of this with my clients, with my communities lately. And so I wanted to talk about this kind of deep knowing, deep inner knowing, and the energy that we need to cultivate in order to get to the heart of what we need so that we're not actually working against ourselves by hustling and trying too hard and doing the things that we don't want to do. Like, I don't want you to be doing that. So today in this episode, I want to go through why knowing what you want and need is so hard. We're also going to go through the July highlights and really show you what's going to be supporting you in this month to go inward and take some time off. Then we'll also be talking a little bit about the Saturn and Neptune retrograde. I'm recording this on June 26th, and if you're like me, you can already feel Saturn coming onto those brakes, Neptune coming onto those brakes, and for me, I'm just like, I'm feeling like gravity is extra heavy right now. And then I want to talk about in the middle of July how we have a Mars and Uranus conjunction, and how this energy can be the disruption that you need to make change happen. And then lastly, I want to share a little bit about Mars in Gemini that we have coming up later in July. So let's take a look. My theme of reclaiming self joy is so that you can live and be so star powered. The vibe of July is knowing what you want, learning how to practice self care and love, playing, imagining, re exploring, and relaxing so that you can redefine yourself and restore yourself and come back with a full cup. July is your month to acknowledge that there is way more to life than work. I know I talk about branding, I talk about leadership, I talk about entrepreneurship, but you know what? Life happens. And if we are not living in, that kind of that, I don't want to say balance, but just like sometimes we need to rest. Let's call it rhythm, in nature's rhythm. If we're not working in nature's rhythm, then we're really truly working against ourselves. So at this time, it's time to savor all of your senses, come back to yourself and what you truly want so you can refill your heart, mind, and soul. Okay, so I started off a little bit earlier about why it's so hard to know what you truly want. Now, oftentimes when my clients come to me, they want to know how they're going to make money. They want to know when they're going to be successful. They want to know how to present themselves so that they are respected and renowned and big. And yes, those are all valid things to want. Like ultimately, I want to create impact in the world. I want to make change in the world. But sometimes it's really good to question why we want something and if this is the right thing that we need. I've been noticing that in the last few weeks that some of the clients that have been coming to me, especially like my deep dive clients, there's so much of this like push and this struggle, and I see it in my clients' faces, and I feel so bad. I hear it in their voices. I feel this kind of what I call kind of striving and grasping and grabbing, like they're trying to like get something that's totally unattainable, and that thinking that if you work extra hard and if you put in all those extra hours that it's going to come, right? And now I'm not saying that to not work hard, because talent and working hard are definitely ingredients for success. However, if you've hit a wall, working harder is not going to give you success sooner. It's actually going to give you success later, because when you hit a wall, it is time to rest. It is time to restore. Mother Nature isn't continuously growing. Mother Nature has times for reflection and introspection and going in and asking why instead of just doing. Now, there's part of this July energy. It's partly the Saturn stationing. It's partly this Neptune stationing, which I'm going to talk to. But if you started to feel this energy, like you're working beyond your means, you're feeling like I got to do this even though I really don't want to, or I feel like I'm not good enough, or I'm not showing up consistently, or I'm not big enough yet, like all of these things that are just like like I can hear what like the hungry ghost in that. And you know what? That's part of hustle culture. And hustle culture is terrible. Of course, hustle culture, we're born into these systems, like the media telling us that we're not pretty enough or smart enough or thin enough or young enough or old enough or anything enough, right? So like we're getting it from like the media that we're already enough. But then also for most of us, and me included, we were brought up in households that just didn't know how to nurture our needs. And so we're looking for this kind of affirmation or validation or acceptance from people who really can't give this to us, whether this be a controlling parent figure or a sibling that was so much older that just didn't want to give you the time of day and it was just always judging you. Or maybe this comes from like a teacher who just like you could never please, but you really wanted to please them, right? It always comes back to our earliest childhood experiences. And this inner critic that is talking in our heads, that's telling us that we're not enough, or we have to be successful in this way, or we have to like show up more consistently, even though we don't want to do that one thing. I always ask my clients, what was this earliest experience? Who was this adoration or the affirmation or the validation or the acceptance? Who was that person that you were looking for that from? Okay. And so if you think back, like I was always looking for my mom to tell me that I was enough, or I was always looking for my dad to tell me that I was smart, even though I didn't want to do what he was asking me to do. right? I want you to start recognizing those kinds of patterns that have like created these grooves in your behaviors and how you're trying to fill those gaps. And so, even if you don't have relationships or your relationships have changed with those earliest caretakers or the people close to you, those supposed loved ones, right? Our parents and our caretakers were literally doing the very best they could at the time, that maybe their best wasn't what we needed and wasn't good enough for us, and what we, wasn't satisfying for us, but we have to believe that they were doing the best that they could with their own experiences and like their own unresolved trauma and emotional needs, right? But where I'm going with this is that in our grown up lives, we are going to meet people that are going to remind us or are going to trigger that relationship. For example, like if you had a father that wasn't there, or a father that, was super controlling, you're going to meet people in your life, whether this be like a business coach or a peer or a boss or a collaborator, that's going to have those kinds of same energies where you're looking like unconsciously looking towards them to fulfill that gap that was never filled in you. And you know what? That person, that projection on that person is never going to fill your own needs. And so by understanding these needs, like what were you looking for? Were you looking for approval? Were you looking for love? Were you looking for acceptance? Were you looking for validation? Were you looking for pride? Like, I'm so proud of you, right? Those are things that you truly, truly need. And the person who's going to be able to give that to you, it's not going to be your business coach. It's not going to be your boss. It's not going to be, your parent figure that, maybe you've healed your relationship or maybe you haven't healed that relationship. That gap, that groove is never going to be filled by an outside person. That has to be filled by yourself. And so it's time to understand what those inner needs are of your inner child, is to understand how you might be working against yourself trying to fill in all of those gaps. So for example, I had this one client recently, um, and she really wanted to learn how she was supposed to make money. And so much of her life was about, spending money because money is going to come in. And I believe that too, but she was going a little bit overboard. And what we found out was that her other coaches and her parents were telling her all kinds of things that she just believed, like all of these stories that, oh, I needed to do this. I had to like fulfill this vision that my dad had of me, even though I didn't want to do that. So I didn't put in my heart and effort. And so my dad would call me not committed, and I would never have any follow through. And I was like, really, are you truly not committed and not having follow through, or do you simply not want to do that thing that you had committed to because you're committing to it for the wrong reason? Okay, maybe I'm going a little bit in circles, but that's because I am tired too. I hope you understand. And then I have another client who's looking for all of this external validation, when I simply asked her, can anybody take away what you have already achieved? Do you not see that whatever you do is already going to have that imprint of achievement? That if you recognize yourself as somebody who's already successful, no matter what you put out into the world, that will also be successful? And so these clients who we've been talking to, like these deep innermost needs, and coming to like, well, what do you need? Of course, we're always coming back to the moon sign. Your moon sign will always tell you what you need. And it's one thing to bring awareness to it, it's another thing to bring acceptance to it. And that sometimes is a really hard pill to swallow, especially if we're fully embedded in the systems, like believing in the outer authority, believing that success only looks a certain way, believing what like controlling parents said to us, or believing what that inner critic is saying. Now, I want you to start to notice the things that your inner critic is telling you. Maybe that you're not good enough, that you're not showing up for yourself, that you're not successful enough, that you're not big enough. And usually, in that not enoughness or whatever that inner critic is telling you, is a seed of truth. Not that your inner critic is telling you what is true, but what it's telling you that you need. And so if you're feeling like you're not good enough, of course you flip that, and that not good enough is feeling valued and feeling an inherent sense of worthiness. Who is going to give that to you? Only you can give that to yourself. If you feel like you've been procrastinating or not showing up or not following through, then really question if you're doing the thing that you truly want to be doing, or are you doing something that somebody at one time told you you should be doing? So you're like, I should be doing that. And then you're constantly guilting yourself and beating yourself up for procrastinating. When you're not truly procrastinating, you're simply not doing the thing that you're not supposed to be doing. Now, of course, there are things that you have to do that you don't want to do, like taxes and, all kinds of those other things. But that is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like in your day-to-day job and work. If there are a lot of things that you're procrastinating on, then it's either not the right time or you're not supposed to be doing that. And so how do you get clear in terms of like, what do you want? Now, what I've noticed is that that voice again of the inner critic is usually the voice, the belief, the story of that person from your youth whom you were desperately wanting approval from, yet never received. The stories that inner dialogue that maybe your controlling parent told you, or an envious sibling, or a controlling cousin, or whoever was in your life that you're like, you really wanted their love and acceptance and approval from, but they just couldn't give it to you. And the inner critic voice makes it so hard to discern what you truly want, right? Whether that's worthiness, joy, easefulness, purpose, from what you think you might want: money, power, accolades, right? I'm not saying that money, power, and accolades are not worthy things to want. My questions are, why do you want those things? And what are you trying to prove by wanting them? Now, you might have some really purposeful and intentional reasons that are completely aligned to your chart, and likely 50-50, you may not. And so to be able to discern and to take this apart is to have that downtime, to find your joy again, to satisfy your emotional needs, and to opt out of the striving hustle culture. Right? Because when you are striving, when you're grasping, when you're hustling, you're stuck in the cycle of the guilt and shame of not enoughness that is driven by that dang inner critic. And so notice, if you get what you've been striving for and it's not the aligned thing, that thing is never truly satisfying, because that's really what you didn't want in the first place. This is much more easy to see in terms of like your personal life. If you happen to be an overspender or an overeater like me, right? Like I'm trying to fill some kind of emotional void in myself, and some trying to feel something that I don't want to feel. And so I turn to the food. I'm like, yum, yum, because that's like satisfying this need of mine. But then that satisfaction is so short lived, because that's not what I truly want. What I truly want is that kind of emotional connection and feeling those emotions. Or if you're buying and buying and buying things, you're trying to fill that gap. Like, if I buy this one thing, then that's going to make me whole and complete and of value. But you buy the thing, it doesn't last. last, and you then go on buying more things because you're trying to feel and feed that place of inner worthiness. Now, we do this in our businesses too, whether you're overbuying, courses and coaches and things like that. And I truly believe in the power of a good course and a good coach when it's aligned to what you truly want and what you truly need. Now, there is a lot of unethical practices going on in the coaching industry, people taking money and like super high ticket items from people who don't have enough money to spend, coaches that are, saying it's this one way, or if you don't do it exactly like me, you're going to fail. No, that's total bullshit. Right? I'm going to call bull on those kinds of coaches. If you have a coach that is telling you it has to be this one way, no. If you have a coach that's taking your money and pressuring you to pay this high ticket thing when you don't have that money, that is unethical. I hope that people are not doing that to you, and I hope that you are not doing that to people. Sorry to go on my rant. I've just been seeing a lot of bullshit lately, and I'm just tired of it. Okay. Now, I'm sharing this all with you because as we move into July, the cosmos is supporting you to spend time to get clear with what you truly desire. What do you need that nurtures your inner child? That comes from your moon sign. And what lights you up from within for joy and creativity and brilliance? That's your sun sign. So understanding what you need and what you want comes right back to your sun and your moon. And if you don't know what you truly need and want, let me tell you, you're going to be stuck on that hamster wheel of never enoughness. And if you don't acknowledge and value the gifts of your moon and the sun sign, you're going to still be stuck on that never enoughness, and you'll never be that luminary that you were born to be. Now, it's not your fault that you don't know what you need and want. Again, right? The systems, the media, our society and culture are on one hand telling us that we're never enough. And then our caretakers, our earliest caretakers who didn't have the capacity or the know-how to be able to guide us in the way we needed, created that. So it's not your fault. However, it is your responsibility to do the inner work and find out. And now that inner work of finding out doesn't mean to work harder. Please do not work harder. Doing the inner work means slowing down, taking some downtime, going inward to find your joy again. And so in July, it's going to be your time to untangle all these limiting beliefs, your inner critic, the systemic thoughts that keep you from your purpose and your truth to get what you truly want. Now, for me in July, I'm going to be recording this one podcast, and then I have my July new moon podcast, the Cancer new moon podcast, and then I'm going to be taking some much needed downtime. I'm really, really, really tired. I'm going to finish up a couple of things that I have that are just like loose end things in my business that I just need to take care of. But on the other hand, I'm going to spend a majority of my time planning. I plan to water paint and swim and finish this intensive astrology course that I've been really wanting to take, but I haven't had the time to like dig in. And I just want to move my body and exercise. I know that this short time off in the grand scheme is going to restore my energy so I can come back with fresh perspectives and inspiration to share with you. Now, I want you to promise me that you'll carve out some of your time to take care of yourself, especially if you've been feeling that hustle, that inner critic, just like, oh, that heaviness. If you've been feeling that heaviness and that push and that need to like just do, that is your cosmic cue that you desperately need some time off. Now, I know this is going to take trust. Please trust in the universe that your bills will get paid and that the answers to all of your problems that you've been hustling for will arrive because you chose to prioritize your self-care. You will land on your feet because you chose to put your self-care first this July. Life is so much more than simply just working. Okay. So I want to talk now about some of the shifts that we are feeling right now and then go into an overview of what's happening in July. So I'm recording this on June 26th. It's Wednesday. And then on Saturday, June 29th, Saturn shifts gears and goes into reverse for its annual retrograde. Its annual retrograde progression from Saturn, Pisces of 19 degrees. Now, when we have these retrogrades, it's not like all of a sudden, boop, Saturn is turned around and it's going backwards. Like it's June 26th, and for all intents and purposes, on Wednesday, you'll probably hear this podcast if you hear it as it drops on Thursday. For all intents and purposes, Saturn in the sky from our perspective has already come to a complete stop. It's not moving. Okay. Now, of course, Saturn is not moving backwards in its orbit. It's just that the way that our orbits, the Earth moves so much faster, we start to lap the sun. And so we start passing Saturn, and then Saturn looks like it's moving backwards from our perspective here on Earth. It is not actually moving backwards. But there is a place, a point in the sky where it's going forward and then going backwards. And because it's so far out there, that point in the sky where it's stopping, just like when you put a car in reverse, you have to, before, if you're going forward and you're driving forward, you can't just go backwards. It's just going to like jerk you and things like that. You have to be going forward, come to a complete stop, shift gears, and then go backwards. And so when we have a planet that's so far out, like Saturn and Neptune, you can think of them as like maybe like a big boat or a big train that it takes even longer for it to come to a complete stop. And then once it shifts gears, it takes a little bit of time for it to get going again, even in that reverse direction. And so for all intents and purposes, Saturn is now stuck and stopped at that 19 degrees and 25 minutes. And it's going to be at this point all the way for Friday, all the way for a couple of more days. And so if you have any planets near that 19 degree of Pisces or mutable signs, Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius, you are going to really be feeling the pressure and the weight of Saturn. And so all of us are kind of feeling this right now. So, that when Saturn comes to a complete stop, when it goes into reverse, we really feel it when it's moving those directions, when it's changing directions, like a week up to that station retrograde and a week after that station retrograde. And Saturn does feel heavy. It feels dense because Saturn is about boundaries. It's about all of the systems and the rules and the hierarchies and just like all of these things, all of these lessons and reputation. It's like it can be very, very heavy. But we want to look at this Saturn, right? Especially when we're thinking about decolonizing our mindset or, taking apart the systems that we operate in to discern whether, again, that inner critic system that we're talking about, like where that came from. And so this Saturn retrograde is really asking you to give yourself some self-compassion. Pisces, of course, is about empathy. It's about compassion. It's about unity. But Saturn and and Pisces also teaches us that everything that we have to experience, whether this be a challenge or a tribulation, is something that our soul chose. It's something that our soul needs along our path, along our journey. Okay. And so with Saturn coming to a complete stop, forgive yourself for your past. You needed to experience the things that you needed to experience. Give yourself some self-compassion. It's not your fault. It is things that you're here to learn. And then use this time, instead of just feeling, woe is me, why me, that heaviness of it all, try to understand, well, what is it that I truly want? Because Saturn is ultimately about your own inner authority. It's not about the external authority, like who we're looking for approval from, who we're looking for recognition from, who we're looking for validation from. The only person that can give you that true validation is yourself. And so Saturn is giving you permission to give yourself some self forgiveness, to give yourself some self compassion, to understand that all of the lessons add to your experience and your wisdom today. And Saturn retrograde is asking you to look at all of the systems that your life is built under and determine what systems actually support your design astrologically, or what systems energetically are not your systems that you need to untangle. Because as Saturn goes retrograde over the next few months, whenever a planet goes retrograde, we get to redo, we get to reorganize, we get to reshift and reclaim all of those Saturnian principles. So it's a perfect time to do the disruption of the systems that we live and breathe, and to really take apart our inner critic so that we stop self-sabotaging, shadow side of Pisces, and start living with ease and flow, because that is truly what it means to be successful. Okay, that's Saturn retrograde. Now, the Saturn retrograde is closely tied to Neptune retrograde, not because they're both in Pisces. Yes, they're both in Pisces, but Neptune retrograde is also stationed out there. Like Neptune is even further out than Saturn, and Neptune goes retrograde 4 days after Saturn on July 2nd. Now, when we have two planetary bodies like that are moving into retrograde, or shifting directions in a very short amount of time, and in a cosmic timeline, of course, a week, 4 days is a very less than a week is a very short amount of time. So both Saturn is going backwards in Pisces, and then Neptune, that almost got to that 0 degree of Aries mark right on the world axis, almost got there. Neptune is like, nope, not gonna cross over that threshold until next year, 2025. I'm gonna hang out at that 29 degrees and 55 minutes. Oof. Right. And so not only are we feeling all the pressure of our systems and like trying to free ourselves from the confines of all of those old systems and beliefs that we have from Saturn, but then Neptune is also now adding confusion on top of things. And so if you've also been feeling foggy headed, like, I don't know which way things are going, it's okay. And so when we have these two types of energies, why are we going to fight against it, trying to get clarity, trying to make moves? Like, obviously, if we're trying and trying and trying, we are working against the energy of the cosmos. And so when Neptune is going in retrograde, Neptune wants us to remember that, hey, we are not here by ourselves. We are all interconnected. We are all spiritual beings. We all belong to the universe and universal love. And so while Neptune can oftentimes add some confusion, Neptune in that confusion is beauty, it's artistry, it's divine love, it's spirituality. And that Neptune is like, can you reestablish a connection to your intuition and your spiritual self? Can you decide that you're going to start to recreate, recalibrate that relationship with your spiritual helpers? Because you're not here to do this by yourself. The audacity to think that we alone have like these wonderful ideas that we're going to be able to execute on our own. No, we get inspired by spirit. So use this Neptune retrograde to open up your imagination and reopen your possibilities, and shift into what this is, to learning to trust those softest parts of yourself. And so Saturn and Neptune, both shifting gears, both in the sky at this moment. I am recording this, just kind of stopped in the sky, like they're not moving. And so extra pressure, extra confusion. So stop being so hard on yourself. Take a rest. As soon as I'm done recording this, let me tell you, I'm taking a nap. Can you see how tired my face is? And so Saturn retrograde is going to go to Pisces of 12 degrees that ends in the middle of November. And the Neptune retrograde goes all the way to the beginning of January, and that goes back to Pisces of 27 degrees. So Neptune is only making 2 degrees back, going 2 degrees back, and Saturn is only going 7 degrees back. And so we're thankful for this time that we get to redo and reconnect to our higher selves and our intuition for Neptune. And with Saturn, we get to redo our own inner authority by really looking at the systems that we need to untangle ourselves from so that we can know what we truly want and recognize ourselves as the expert. Okay. Now, the rest of July, we have Mercury that is still pretty full speed ahead. Mercury is entering Leo also on July 2nd. And Mercury is starting to slow down because instead of just zipping through and spending 2 weeks in Leo, it's actually going to spend 3 weeks in Leo because it's slowing down. And once it hits Virgo at the end of July, on July 25th, that's when Mercury starts to come to a real slowdown because it's going to be slowing down, getting ready for our August Virgo retrograde. And so with Mercury entering Leo, when it gets to that Leo of 21 degree mark on July 6th, Mercury now will be entering the shadow zone of its retrograde cycle. It's still going to be going direct, but it's going to be in that shadow zone, which is truly a foreshadowing of the lessons that you'll have to reorganize and redo and rethink for our Mercury retrograde in August. And so you can see now that we're talking about all of these retrogrades, Saturn, Neptune in retrograde, Pluto already in retrograde, Saturn, Neptune in retrograde, and then getting ready for Mercury to also be in retrograde. So the energy is shifting as we move into the second half of the year, where we have to recalibrate. We are grateful that we have these energies recalibrating. So Mercury again enters Leo on July 2nd, but on July 16th, when it gets to that Leo of 21 degrees, that's the shadow zone, because in August, when Mercury moves backwards, it's going to go all the way backwards to that Leo of 21 degrees. So when in the middle of July, when you start noticing Mercury that past that Leo 21 degrees, start to notice what things start breaking down in terms of like your communications or your thought processes, because that's going to give you insight as to what you're going to be working on in that upcoming Mercury retrograde. Okay, going back in time, we have our 2 lunations. We have our lunations with our new moon in Cancer on July 5th at Cancer 14 degrees. I'm going to have a whole episode on that, so I'm going to save time for that, lay out that conversation next week. And then we have a blue moon in Capricorn at Capricorn of 29 degrees on July 21st. So we get 2 Capricorn full moons this year. Our strawberry moon that we had a few weeks ago near solstice, and then our blue moon in Capricorn on July 21st. Now Venus, she's still moving full speed ahead. Venus also joins Leo. So Mercury moved into Leo on July 2nd. Venus moves into Leo on July 11th. And then, of course, our sun moves into Leo 11 days later on July 22nd. And so we can think of, again, Mercury and Venus, they're laying out the carpet, getting ready for the sun to come into Leo. I love that the summer, we have Cancer season and Leo season. And remember what I said about knowing what you need to feel emotionally secure, to nourish that inner child, moon. That's when we're in Cancer season, figuring it out. And then figuring out what lights us up from within, that radiance, that creative brilliance, our superpowers, our zone of genius. That's the sun's That's the sun's work in Leo. So we get both of our luminaries smack down in the summer. Well, summer in the northern hemisphere, but it still applies in the southern hemisphere, that we need to take this time to do that deep inner work. And we do it every year. What do I need? What lights me up? What do I need? What lights me up? And when we get really clear and certain in this, and we acknowledge this, and we accept this, and we recognize this, and we like embody this, that's when your true brilliance and confidence start to shine through. Okay, my friends. So just reinforcing that. Okay. Now, mid July, around peaking at July 15th, is when Mars and Uranus meet up in Taurus. Mars, the planet of activation and motivation, but in the shadows, fear and anxiety, and Uranus, the planet of awakening and change, but in the shadows, disruption and rebel without a cause, right? These two planets, they have very similar energies, that they're just electric, they're energizing kind of energies. They're very kinetic energies, and they're both meeting up in not so kinetic Taurus energy, right? So Mars and Uranus don't really love being in Taurus, and they're meeting up. And so now we have like kinetic Earth. Of course, there's astrologers that are like, okay, well, what kind of volcanoes and what kind of earthquakes might be having at this time? And when you think of this just interpersonally, what kind of seismic shifts are you going to be creating? Now, when we have Mars and Uranus coming together, there's nothing that is predictable. So if you're somebody who has a little bit of control issues, no judgments, right? We just have to notice those things about ourselves. Like, where am I always looking for certainty that I can't create certainty, because there's no such thing as a guarantee in this world, right? These energies have a spectrum of interpretations and possibilities. And so if we can just enjoy the ride with Mars and Uranus, with the disruptions, knowing that no matter how we land is how we're supposed to land, about where our soul path wants to take us, then we can rise with grace when things don't go as expected, when our outcomes don't come out exactly as planned, because maybe we're not supposed to have a plan. Maybe we're supposed to have an intention, and like, oh, we missed the mark a little bit, but that's okay. We can try to go this way. Oh, I like this. Like, if we're so focused on a specific outcome, this is what creates unhappiness, frustration, resentment, anger. And so Mars and Uranus, when they meet up in that midweek, and so of course that energy is going to be building up for a week before July 15th, and building down after that July 15th. I want you to have some patience. I want you to have some grace for yourself, because whether you're conscious of this Mars Uranus meetup or not, especially if people are not conscious of this, they're just running around like trying to like force things and push things and being impulsive, like that's when people get hurt. Okay. And I don't want that to happen for you. So have some patience, have some grace, let go of expectations, and just enjoy the ride. See what happens. And, just like motivate, use your body. If you're feeling a lot of buzzy kinetic energy within you, that is your call again to move your body. Remember when I was saying in Hawaii, what I want to focus on is moving my body, because I need to get some of this stagnant energy out so that I don't hurt myself. Okay. And so this is in the middle of July, peaking on July 5th. Mars and Uranus meet in Taurus. Okay. Now, shortly after that, 5 days later, Mars blasts into Gemini, where Mars and Gemini, Mars is like so energetic, and Gemini is like, woo, like just like everything is everywhere all at once. And so that energy, especially with Jupiter in Gemini, this is really going to start accelerating. Now, Mars isn't going to get close to Jupiter, not until like early August. So again, this is your call feel that July is a time to rest and restore, because once we hit August, it's just going to be, everything is going to be so fast. Okay. So take your time, take some breathers, find out what you need, get in tune with what lights you up, and focus on those things, because that creates ease and impact. Okay. So Mars enters Gemini on July 20th. Then we have the sun entering Leo on July 22nd. I love Leo energy. It's so bright. It's so hot. It's so creative. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get closer to that time later in July. And then lastly, again, I'll mention that Mercury moves into its home sign of Virgo on July 25th, where it's going to be spending an extra long time in Virgo. It's going to dip its toes back into Leo during its Mercury retrograde. But, Mercury loves being in Virgo. And so if you've done your rest, if you've done your deep inner work of tuning into all the systems that you need to divorce yourself from, if you've done your work about reconnecting to spirit, if you've done your work of understanding what you need to nourish your emotional needs so that you can create that inner sense of authority, if you've done your work to really know what lights you up and go full in on that, by the time Mercury enters Virgo, its home sign, you are going to be so ready to put together your plans of action, to organize how you're going to get through all of this thing, to bullet journal, to get all those things done. Wait until the end of July. So please let this be your call. Let this be your permission slip to just rest a little. Okay. That is how you become star powered, is by working with the cycles of the cosmos instead of against them, by understanding yourself and your true identity according to your natal design. And of course, understanding where you are in your journey by and looking at the inner awakening that you're supposed to discover. And I know that you're supposed to discover something this July. So please, please, please do your work. And that work is resting and knowing what you need and what you want this July so that you can be star powered. All right, my friends, I would love to hear what you would like to, how you're going to be taking some time off, and some of the intentions that you want to know about yourself, or the things that you want to untangle for yourself to do the deep inner work this July. All right, my friends, signing off for now. Bye, everyone. As a human design projector, my energy shines more brightly because of people like you who share my work. If you enjoy this podcast and want to help build a movement of innovative astrology and leadership and spark the intuitive revolution, please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, or better yet, share this podcast with your change-making besties. We will all shine brighter together as we create the future we want to see.